Welcome back to another episode of First Light, where we explore stories of inspiration, transformation, and leadership that light the way for others. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Pastor Ben Pierce, the visionary leader behind Generation Church in Jupiter, Florida. Pastor Ben and his wife, Melissa, transitioned from successful corporate careers to answer a higher calling, creating a vibrant and growing community centered on faith, connection, and outreach. In this episode, we'll dive into Pastor Ben's personal journey, the challenges and triumphs of leading a modern church, and the powerful ways faith can transform lives and communities. Whether you're a person of faith or just looking for inspiration, Pastor Ben's story is sure to resonate with you. So let's get started. Welcome to First Light. I'm privileged to have Pastor Ben Pierce of Generation Church. He's my lead pastor at the church that I belong to. He's played such a big role in my life in inspiring me to be a better husband, a better father, a better follower of God, and a better leader. So who better to come and talk to us today than Pastor Ben Pierce? I want you to introduce yourself to those who may not know you and talk about your transition from the corporate world to being the founding Generation Church.
Yeah, well, Chris, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and get to speak to you and the audience. We have kind of an interesting journey. We did not start out as like church planters or church people. We started out in the business world. And I have a degree in chemistry and a degree in biology, and Melissa in finance. And so, we were just kind of doing that thing, living life. And we were both really kind of just going for it in our careers. But somewhere in the back of our heart and in our mind, we felt this tug. And we felt like, gosh, there's got to be something more to this. And, we were in our mid-20s, both making six-figure incomes, and it still didn't do it for us. And so as we felt this like tugging on our hearts, like there's got to be something more that we can engage in life, just through our local church, we started to explore the idea of like, how could we give more to that? How could we develop our spirituality more? And through that process, we really felt like we were at some point supposed to pioneer a new church. And I didn't know what to do with that. Like, we didn't grow up I'm not a pastor's kid. Melissa's not a pastor's kid. So I was like, how do you do this? Like, do you have to call the Pope? Like, how are you allowed to start a church? And so we started that journey, and we were volunteering at our church for about 5 years as youth pastors. And it's a big church, 13,000 member church in Virginia. And it was in that process that the things that we felt in our heart, we actually started to see materialize. So we were able to take this youth group that was almost non-existent when we started, and it grew to a couple hundred kids, and we were seeing a lot of success in that, and we were beginning to feel like the spiritual side of our lives develop. Like, the financial side was great, the marriage side was great, the physical side of exercising and working out and all those things were lining up, but the spiritual part was really beginning to blossom. And so, we saved up our money. I think we saved up $55,000, and that's what we started the church with in 2008. And we were bi-vocational for the first 3 years, and I was working in pharmaceuticals at the time, and Melissa in finance as a recruiter, and started that journey. And we look back in the rearview mirror now, and it feels like we've lived several lives or several careers, and it's just been an amazing journey.
Well, let's talk about that. So, one thing we talk about a lot on the show is the Power Five: your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial well-being. And it sounds like you guys were rocking on all of those categories except for the spiritual side, though you were very involved in church. And so talk about how important spirituality, faith, and how that's really affected your life now, from being in the corporate world to planning a church and now being a lead pastor of this amazing growing church.
Yeah, we are spiritual beings. Like, that's the core of who we are. And, whether you're a believer in Jesus Christ listening to this podcast or you're not a believer, you're still spiritual. And we're all on that journey to find that connection with our Creator. And so the easiest parts of life to find are mental health and physical health and, our financial health and all of those, emotional health, all of those areas. But sometimes the most difficult is really the most important, which is our spirituality. And so for us, that was the area that needed the most growth, as it is for a lot of people. And so as we started to dive into that and develop that, it really began to cause life to blossom for us in ways that we hadn't really realized. And honestly, like there's like this desire, this need meeting or satisfaction drive that we all have, running the hamster wheel of life, and we can get all of these things going in the right direction. And 4 of the 5, typically, most people in our generation are executing at a high level. But that 5th one of spirituality is usually a big growth area. And so we just saw when we started to focus on that, we saw just a massive shift and change in life. And all of the other things that we were seeking after in life, finances and friends and positions and careers and all of that, still didn't satisfy us. But it was when we got in touch with our spiritual lives that we began to have this sense of completeness and wholeness and satisfaction.
There's a lot to unpack there, but one thing I want to talk about, you hit on the hamster wheel of life. And I'm sure as a pastor leading a growing church, having 2 young kids, being married, being that visionary leader, juggling it all. So how do you go about staying healthy in those categories? And, what kind of routine do you follow? Things do you practice to keep you optimizing and being at the highest level?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that has to start with the internal parts and pieces: emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, your relationships. Those are the parts where we start. And so, to manage all the things on the outside, you have to be complete and whole on the inside. And I even think for like men today, for our men's group at church, I'm really focused on helping men be men and do what we're created and designed to do. And men just need time to think. Men need time to be alone and to just process the day and process what's happening in the future days. And that kind of alone time is vital. And we kind of lost that. Running the rat race of life, men have lost some of those foundational parts and pieces of who they are. And so for us, that's where it starts. It starts with that time focusing on the spiritual side of life with God, studying the scripture, spending time praying. And it's amazing when God does something supernatural in those moments where he speaks something to you that nobody could know except God, or he speaks something to someone else that encourages you with something that they had no way of knowing. It was just a God moment. So starting with that spiritual part is how we balance kids and balance life. And we have a 6-year-old and a 2.5, almost 3-year-old, both boys. And if you are a boy dad or you have a couple of boys in the house, it's mayhem. From the time they wake up, they're just into everything, exploring everything. And so I need Jesus just to make it through being a dad. That's where it starts. That's how we balance that. We have to be intentional with our schedules. We have to be intentional with carving out time to work on the internal things first.
Well, I know your wife spoke this weekend on David and Goliath being played out in your backyard every day. But let's talk about, for you specifically, how do you structure your day? I know for me, the morning hours have been so critical to me. Having 3 kids, having a law firm, finding the time to find that time in silence was so hard until I decided, hey, if I only got up an hour earlier, what could I accomplish? And so now I'm up at 5 a.m. most days. Before then, I start my day with prayer. The first thing I do when I wake up is pray. That was at your inspiration and changing that for me, and find that time reading the scripture. Bought 2 books that you recently recommended and started reading those, and it's played such huge dividends. But what kind of routine do you follow?
Yeah, I mean, we do a similar routine. We are early morning people by nature. I think, unfortunately, our genetics have passed on to our children, and so we have early risers for kids as well. And so we are, 5 a.m. kind of people, and our kids are like 5:15. And so, for us, like we have some pretty stark rules in our house, and 6:45 is the time that you can come out of your room. And so we're training our kids to have their own quiet time and their own play time, and that gives us some space too. And so that helps a lot. But that's our routine. Like, we get up early. we have also found, with two very active boys in the house, by like 8:30 or 9 o'clock, we're having trouble staying awake. And so we've been going to bed earlier and earlier. And Melissa is now in the place where she gets up at 4. And I'm not there yet. I'll let her walk that path for a while. But yeah, we get up early. We spend our time, and we do the same thing. We spend our time talking to God, praying, asking questions, committing the day, asking for guidance, help for the day. And we spend time reading through the scriptures, and we do various different things. Like there are reading plans that we follow, like read the Bible in a year. There's a ton of things on the YouVersion app that are helpful to that. But most often it's really just, God, we're here to commune with you today. What do you want to say to us? And then as those thoughts come, we take our direction from that. And so sometimes, we'll just get a thought like, hey, read this passage of scripture out of the Bible. And so it's a very fluid environment for us. And so that's kind of the routine. And then, like I said, 6:45 is when they're allowed to come out of their rooms, although that's after 10 or 12 attempts to come out. And then we, do breakfast and get everybody ready for school.
Let's talk about those early years when you were planning a church in Jupiter, and talk to us kind of the challenges that you faced. I'm sure it wasn't always easy. So can you talk about those early challenges and how your faith played such a role in overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, there are challenges in entrepreneuring anything. And, usually the person who has an entrepreneurial heart wants to stay in the mix of what they love. But in order to make it successful, you have to be able to come out of doing what you love and train other people to begin to work in that with you. And for us, it's a difference of working in it or working on it. And if we're working in it so much, we don't have enough time to work on it. And so those were some of the early challenges of just, when you have to do everything. When we first started the church, I was still full-time with Merck Pharmaceuticals. So full work week, and then Saturday, basically the whole day was a study and preparation day as I'm working on content. And then Sunday was deliver that content and then collapse and rest and try to get ready for the next one. But, we were in that phase too where I did all the graphics and did all the preaching. We were running before service to Kinko's to pick up copies of, handouts and things like that. So it was a challenge to try to do all that. So we, in short order, realized that we need help and we need people. We need to be able to lead people and inspire people to help them catch a vision with us. And so in about 18 months, we were able to grow out of the school that we started in and move into our first retail space. And that opened up a new chapter of long-term leases and build-outs and how to handle all of the details that come along with that. And, the late, great Peter Drucker says that there are 4 careers in this world that are the most challenging. Being a CEO of a health organization is one of them. And the next one in that list is to be a pastor of a megachurch. And, today it's not just being a spiritual leader. You have to be a CEO and manage budgets and staff and all of that. So we had to learn through those challenges rather quickly.
Well, and I know now you have this beautiful facility on Center Street, and you've had to deal with the town of Jupiter and getting permitting. So kind of talk about how you face all those challenges every day.
Yeah, I mean it's a walk for sure to learn how to navigate all of that, and I think my spirituality has really helped with that though, because I'm not only just trying to develop property, but there's also a spiritual mission there as well too. And the people of the town of Jupiter are important to God, and they're important to me. They're not just a means to accomplishing our goals. And so being able to see those journeys as an opportunity to share faith with the people who are in governance is definitely a huge part of what we want to do and try to do. But it's a challenge, as it is with walking anything through. Our former mayor, Todd Wodraska, said it this way: it's the grind of government, and things just take a long time to get through sometimes. And so, navigating that, we've really had to learn and hire consultants and walk through that and just be patient and allow those processes to come through. But I think the spirituality part has helped us because when I first met with the director of planning and zoning, instead of just coming in and saying, hey, here's what we're doing, I want you to approve it, we came in and said, hey, we have some dreams and desires. There's some things we want to do, but I know you have a master plan that you have accountability to the town council for. How can we work together? Where would you like to see us go? What would help fit into the master plan? And so starting that relationship and friendship, I think, has been pretty critical. And if it hadn't been for spirituality and faith and really caring about that man's soul, I don't know that that would have been a part of the journey.
Can you talk about the evolving vision of Generation Church? Because I'm sure when you and Melissa were first planning a church in Jupiter, Florida, you didn't know what it was going to look like, how big it was going to be, how many people would attend, and growing new campuses and expanding. So can you talk about kind of what your vision was for Generation Church and how that's evolved over the years and what the vision is now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the vision has always been larger than life for us. Like, you don't leave high-paying careers and walk away from all of that without having some kind of vision that is bigger than you. So it has always been to pastor a large church that makes a huge impact in the community, that has multiple sites, that extends even beyond a local community, that reaches other communities in other states around the nation, and even today online around the world. And but it's interesting, as someone who starts something from scratch, whether you're entrepreneuring a business or launching a church or whatever, you usually have a vision that is, way out there, and then the reality on day one sets in that I'm nowhere close. And what you want it to be, what you want your law firm to be, the number of clients and the types of cases or whatever business you're doing, it usually the reality of day one sets in rather quickly. And so we've always had the same vision, but the pace at which we execute that has changed. And in the early days, it was full throttle. And I realized that full throttle didn't really change the pace as much as it just wore me out. Because there are certain steps that have to take place. There are growth steps. There's, scaffolding that has to be put up. The people you start with are not the people typically you finish with, and so the vision was always the same, but the methodologies were always changing. And so today we still have that same vision of reaching communities around South Florida, the whole state, the nation, and even the world. We're getting ready to launch a second location in Stewart, and having discussions around a larger location here in Jupiter. And so to see what God has in store for the future is exciting.
Talking about the kind of the vision of the church and how it's achieved, I know one big thing that you guys do is community outreach and have that community impact. But before we get into that, what I want to talk to you about is at Generation Church, there's a huge production, and what I mean is there's people volunteering who are greeting, there's people working the kids check-in, there's people working the Sunday school, there's the production teams who are videoing, social media, people on stage singing. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in this service to make it such an amazing experience, and it's so well orchestrated. And I'm sure to us on the outside, it comes off perfectly, but there's a lot going on. Yeah. So talk about, kind of having to build that team to have all these different things going on. And not only do you do it for, one service, you're doing it for 3 services. And, I know for Christmas season's coming up, you got a lot going on. So talk about kind of the planning of all these services and what really goes into it and how much is involved in leading that team to pull together such amazing services.
Well, thank you. Sometimes they feel amazing. Sometimes they don't. I'm a perfectionist in my personality type. So on the Enneagram, I'm a 1. And so it could be an amazing service that I hate. So we're always stretching and growing. But, I realized this, that a leader without someone following them is really just a man taking a walk. And so when I realized that we needed people to help us do this, developing and honing my leadership skills and inspiring people and helping them catch a vision that we were casting was an important part of that. And, today there are hundreds of people that make a weekend service happen. And from, parking lot attendants to people in the coffee area making lattes to the kids' church and the production teams and so on and so forth. And it takes time. One of the books that really changed me as a leader in the church world, we would call an entrepreneur an apostle. So in an apostolic sense of building a church. The book that really changed me was called the E-Myth Revisited, and it's the entrepreneurial myth. And, it's this idea that if you start a business or you pioneer something for the love of that thing, at some point, if you want it to grow, you're going to have to step aside and let people start engaging in the thing that you love. And you have to step away from the mechanics and really begin to cast vision and lead. And so that's a big part of what we have tried to do is to give ministry opportunities away. And so today, there are 250 volunteers that make a weekend service happen. And if it were not for all of those people, it wouldn't happen because I physically can't be in every spot at all times. And so that, I think, for anybody listening today, for your dreams and your desires, whatever business you're running or career path you're on, understanding that you've got to have people with you that are excited about what you're excited about and trained to do it as good as you would do it is an important, vital part of it.
Yeah, and one thing I want to talk about in that is, because it's true in the business world too, as church, is it's about the experience. Like you said, there's parking lot attendants who are greeting you in the parking lot and showing you where to park and making it easy for you to find a parking space. You have VIP parking spots for people who are coming for the first time. You have greeters, so just all these people who are making you feel welcome. And so much like a business, that's that first experience, that first interaction with the business is so important. And I see you guys spending so much time investing on that, and then also during the service itself, recognizing the first-time people. So customer service goes so much into even a church, and making that experience so great. Let's talk about community outreach and involvement. Obviously, this is a church, and we expect churches to be involved in the community. My firm is very active in the community, but talk about how important community outreach and community focus is to the church.
Yeah, I mean, that's really everything. The reason why we do what we do is so we can reach people in the community with the message of Jesus and the gospel, and to help them maybe engage spirituality if they've never thought about that. And so getting out in the community is a huge part of that. So, we do a few things that we try to do well. We try to do weekend services well, and that's a place where people come and get encouraged and developed and connect with God. We try to do community outreach well because that's the avenue for new people to come and connect with God. And we try to do groups well because groups are where relationships happen and life change happens and, learning happens. Those are the things that we really try to focus on and do well. And so the fourth one would be getting everybody on some type of spiritual growth track. So, as we bring all of these things together, if there were not community outreach, eventually it would just dry up. So it's a huge part of what we do. Plus, it's just who we are. It's kind of in our DNA to us. Even when we were youth pastors, we were taking groups of 60 or 70 students to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and renting a stage on the boardwalk and bringing in a hip hop band and doing hip hop music and a big dance contest, and then at the end of that we would share a gospel message with that community. And so it's just a part of who we are. If we're not doing good in the community, then what are we doing?
The other thing I want you to talk about that's so important, and I'm working more and more on in my own spiritual journey, is service. And I know we talk about it a lot at church about, being an active participant and stepping up and serving. So talk truly about how important service is to fill in that spiritual component and to helping you achieve that level 10 self.
Yeah, if you go back to the words of Jesus, he is the King of all kings, right? Everything was created for him, through him, and by him. And the scripture tells us that he came to serve, not to be served. If there was anybody who deserved to be served, it would be the one who created everything. And so for him to come with the mindset of, I'm not here to be served, I don't want you to bow down to me, I'm here to serve you, And then he goes on to say, the greatest among us is the greatest servant. So there's something internal in humanity that is built into us that service touches. When we get into a place where, we are too good to serve, or we're too busy to serve, we're really missing a component of how you were created. And it's a hole for people. If you think about it, when you serve or you do something good for somebody, you help somebody out, you help someone stranded on the side of the road, you take someone to a gas station that ran out of gas, you help pay for someone's groceries that forgot their debit card, it does something inside of you. Like there's just a sense of satisfaction, fulfillment that comes from that. So you were created, or we were created with that side of us that wants to help, the altruistic side of humanity wants to help, wants to serve. And so we make that a huge part of it. If the greatest people among us are the greatest servants, well, let's help people become great. So let's help them serve. Let's give them opportunities. Let's encourage them to do that. And what we found is, out of all the groups and areas within our context and our community, the people who serve are the ones that tend to grow the fastest. They tend to have the least issues and problems in life. They tend to be the most satisfied and complete individuals. And so what we call our dream team is our volunteer team, where we invite people to serve. And part of what we do is we just don't want you to come and do something that you don't want to do or that we need you to do. So we ask the questions like, what are you good at? What do you like? And we give a spiritual gift assessment that helps to mine out of a person, like what are they gifted at, so that we can help them fit like a hand in a glove with the place that they're gifted to be.
Yeah, and so much of that is true in running a business. We do that with our team members to try to find where they can be best suited. Not everybody's best suited for certain jobs, and making sure that they're in their circle. Let's talk about the service this weekend really got me with your wife leading the service on the main character.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about kind of that main character mentality, and really because I thought it was such an important message. And I took so much away from it this weekend.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the main character and a lot of kind of tied into being a leader? I think a lot of times as leaders, we have that ego that, everybody's here to serve us and we're not there to serve. So can you talk about main character and how you lead in your leadership mentality?
Yeah. I wish Melissa was here because, the message.
She crushed it.
Yeah, she did a phenomenal job. The main leader energy, kind of that terminology that goes around today is really it's kind of focused on me. It's a self-centered mentality. And if everything is about you, then you are limited to accomplishing only what you can accomplish. And if we can get this main character mentality set aside and honestly really pick up the principles of the Scripture of the Bible, you'll find that we are not the main character. That there is a main character. His name is Jesus, and we are in a supporting role. And we find our greatest place in life when we are in that supporting role. And so, from a main character energy perspective, it's really humbling ourselves and setting ourselves aside and allowing someone else to step up. So, I'm intentional with that as a leader. I think sometimes when you are a leader that is on a platform, an actor, a singer, someone that's in a community-facing role, a lot of what you have is built around you and your personality. And so in a lot of those roles, it's really easy to just be the one. And a lot of pastors are that way. Out of 52 weeks in a year, a lot of us will speak, 51 weeks out of 52. And so anyway, over the years, I've just really, and we as a team have been really intentional to create space for other people. And if I'm not raising up a successor, then I have not really become a success. And so giving other folks opportunities to speak on the weekend is not a threat to me, and I have to see it as an opportunity. And so that is one of the ways that that we set aside this main character energy, or I do personally, is I give my executive pastor 8 or 10 weekends, and our worship pastor speaks a few times, and Melissa speaks several times, and so giving that ministry away. So I would just encourage anybody listening, if you're doing absolutely everything, then you are your lid. And so, and you maybe in some ways are your own main character, and that energy is only going to take you so far. If you open it up to other people, you'll find that there are probably people around you and your team that are better at certain things than you are, and they'll take you further than you can take yourself.
Amazing advice. I want to ask you about if you could share a time where your faith was tested and kind of how you navigated through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every season is a test of faith. It seems like, you have this faith victory and you go on to this next thing, and it's just as hard as it was the last time. And, COVID was probably a test for just about everybody. If you're a business owner and you're not able to open your business, we were a church. We CO'd a brand new facility on the 5th of May, 2020, right as everything was shutting down. And so I'm sitting there with a $5 million building and not allowed to put people in it. And that was a big test of faith, as to we've had this journey of faith to get to this place, to raise this money, to purchase this facility, 2 years of walking through with historic resource boards and town council meetings, 13 of them to be exact, to get all of these things to the place of having a certificate of occupancy, and now we can't occupy it. So that was a big faith test, just to trust, that God had a plan for us, and that, even though things had shifted and changed, that it wasn't the end. And we were going to be able to pay the mortgage. And honestly, Chris, at that moment too, it actually was an opportunity for us to trust God for even something bigger and better than if we had just started meeting in a grand opening as normal. And what I found from that is there were people in our congregation that were so bought into the vision. They were so behind what was going on that the finances actually increased in that season, even though we weren't meeting. Our online viewership continued to increase, and honestly, we reached more people in a season where we weren't even allowed to gather than we probably would have reached had we had a traditional grand opening.
How about personally?
Personally, for us, as pastors, we, family is important. Like, you spend your life creating moments for other people. Like, our Christmases are spent creating Christmas for everybody else. And so, having our own family to have those moments with is an important part. And, for whatever reason, we found ourselves in a predicament of infertility. And for 7 years, regardless of what the doctors told us or the tests said, there was just no resolution to it. And it was difficult because not only were we not able to have kids, but there was no distinct reason why. So it was just empty and void. And all we could do in that time was really just rely on God. And, it was a very painful time because as a pastor, part of our role is to marry all the young kids, bury all the old people, dedicate all the babies, go to all the showers, and all the gender reveals and all. So we're there. We have to be there. And, every 28 days for 7 years was extremely painful, especially for Melissa, and having to be in those environments. And, you can get to a place where you can begin to question God. God, you've put us in this role. This is what we do. And yet we don't even have our own family. And very similar to the story of Abraham and Sarah and in the Old Testament. And, the end of their story was that God took their infertility and made the nation of Israel. And honestly, through Jesus, like, we are all the descendants of Abraham. And so just trusting God through that season, that was one of the most painful. And but on the other side of that, you look back, and the faithfulness of God is amazing. So Melissa had done all the, treatments and had a couple of surgeries and things like that. And she was scheduled to begin in vitro fertilization on a Wednesday. And my wife won't take a Tylenol. So for her to begin to take all of the medication to get ready for in vitro fertilization was just heart-wrenching to her. And it was a Sunday night before that Wednesday that we had a guest speaker in town, and I have this guy at the beach, and we're fishing, and I get this text from Melissa. and she says, "Hey, I need you to bring me a pregnancy test." And, I'm kind of responding back, "Babe, what's going on? I really can't do that. I've got this guest speaker and, we're fishing." And she's like, "I need you to bring me a pregnancy test." And the next line was, "and a good one that says in words, pregnant or not pregnant. No faint pink lines." And, I didn't know what was happening, but she had been at home and just in her personal time with God, she felt like the Lord said to her, "I want you to take a pregnancy test." And after every 28 days of 7 years of this, this is when you buy pregnancy tests in bulk. Like, it's like 100 at a time. Her response was, "I'm not putting myself through that pain tonight." But she couldn't get away from it. And God just kept speaking to her. And so finally she, took 2 pregnancy tests, but, it's the bulk pink faint line. And she's like, "I can't tell if this is saying I'm pregnant or not." And hence the text to me to bring a higher quality pregnancy test. By the end of the night, she had taken 4 pregnancy tests, and they had all said positive. And so, it's interesting because after 7 years, you get to that place of, 3 days away from starting the next treatment that you really don't want to. And it feels like sometimes that God is late or uncaring or distant, but actually he's just doing what he's doing in the fullness of time. And we look back on it and we realize that for what we were called to do, that there was a time and a season for us to have kids, and launching and entrepreneuring a church and bringing those kids into the world in those early days would have been even more difficult. And so he has it all worked out. And so, we have today 2 amazing young boys. I tell our church we had a lot of faith after 7 years for Hudson, our firstborn, to come. And we had so much reserve faith left over that Ethan just showed up out of nowhere. We're really not sure how he got here. He was a huge surprise to us.
Well, let's talk about people who are facing whatever challenges in life. We all go through those seasons as you've talked about. What advice do you give to those people, especially people who maybe have found their way from church, or who've never, gone to church or had that relationship with God?
Yeah, I mean, we are built to be spirit, soul, and body. And, the 5 things that you're talking about to be your best version of yourself, they work on different areas of spirit, soul, and body. And a lot of us are very focused on the soul part, our emotional health and relationship health and all those areas. And we're focused on our physical health and financial health and those areas. But a lot of times the one that is missed the most is the spiritual side. But it is who you really are. When you take off the physical body and you breathe your last breath, you live an eternal life as a spiritual being. And so whatever challenges or struggles you're going through, the way to get through those is to live in a life that is growing spiritually, exploring a faith journey, asking those big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Is there a creator? If there is, why did he create me, and what did he create me for? If you can answer and get down to the bottom of those questions, the other areas of life all begin to work together. And so whatever struggles we're going through, the spiritual part of that is the core. And if you'll take some time to go find a good church or find a great friend like Chris to ask some questions and begin that faith journey, you'll find that there's so much inside of you that God wants to reveal and unleash. And for a lot of us, it is a missing link. It's a key that unlocks parts of our lives that seem to be missing. And when you begin that journey, you'll find that it begins to come together in a complete and whole way.
Well, lastly, let's talk about those opportunities that are coming up at Generation Church to really get involved and take that faith journey with Generation Church. I know it's the holiday seasons, and we're going to have a Christmas Eve service and a lot of going on. So for those who are listening, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Generation Church this holiday season.
Yeah, I think we have seven services. So we're not just doing Christmas Eve services; we're doing Christmas Eve services. There are 2 on Christmas Eve, the 23rd at 4 and 6, I believe, and then on Christmas Eve, I think it's, 2, 4, and 6. But if you go to our website, generationchurch.com, you can find the schedule there, and you can actually reserve a spot, and so you'll get early entrance into the room, so
which I highly recommend.
Yeah. I always feel bad. At Christmas and Easter, we had 1,700 people show up at the Easter services a few months ago, and I always feel bad when they end up having to be in the foyer because they were, a little late getting there. So reserve your seats and come check it out, and then just come with an open heart and see if God has something for you in that.
Well, Pastor Ben, I appreciate your time. I know there was so many valuable lessons in there for our listeners, so thank you again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
What an incredible conversation with Pastor Ben Pierce. His journey reminds us of the power of stepping into our calling and the impact we can have when we lead with faith, purpose, and a heart for others. Thank you, Pastor Ben, for sharing your insights, your vision, and your passion for inspiring a generation to follow their light. For our listeners, if today's conversation moved you, please be sure to check out Generation Church and the amazing work they're doing in Jupiter and beyond. As always, thank you for tuning into First Light.